The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Min-Jun Park stood at the human podium. The massive circular room held representatives from 47 species, each seated in sections designed for their unique biology. The Kravik delegation towered in their reinforced seats, their scales gleaming under the station lights. The systematic floated in their containment fields, geometric patterns shifting across their energy forms. The Veltros sprawled across heated platforms, their 6 eyes fixed on various data streams. Min-Jun adjusted his simple gray suit and smiled politely. His voice carried clearly through the translation matrix that allowed all species to understand each other. Honored Council members, humanity wishes to formally announce our withdrawal from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Council Leader Thexron, a massive Kravik with deep purple scales, leaned forward in his seat. Ambassador Park, please clarify. Do you mean a temporary leave of absence? No, Council Leader. A complete and permanent withdrawal. We are resigning our membership. The chamber erupted, not in shock or dismay, but in confused murmuring. The Veltros delegation activated their communication devices, checking if the translation had malfunctioned. The systematic pulsed in patterns that indicated mild puzzlement. Thexron raised one clawed hand for silence. Ambassador, humanity has been a council member for 47 years. May we ask why you are taking this action? Min-Jun's smile never wavered, but his eyes held a quiet sadness. We feel our contributions are not valued by this body. After careful consideration, we have decided to pursue our own path. A Veltros representative spoke up, her translator making her hissing sound matter-of-fact. With respect, Ambassador, humanity holds no significant military power. Your economic output ranks 32nd among council members. What contributions do you believe are undervalued? Min-Jun paused. He could have listed everything. He could have reminded them of the thousands of human diplomats, counselors, mediators, and aid workers spread across council space. He could have mentioned the countless hours humans spent doing the work nobody else wanted. Instead, he simply bowed. We wish the council well in all future endeavors. Our embassies will close within 30 days. All human personnel will be withdrawn in an orderly fashion. We hold no ill will toward any member species. Thexron shifted in his seat. Ambassador Park, surely we can discuss this. There is no need for such drastic action over a perceived slight. It is not a slight, Council Leader. It is a pattern spanning decades. But we bear you no anger. We simply choose to focus our efforts elsewhere. Min-Jun gathered his data tablet and walked calmly toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet chamber, the door sealed behind him with a soft hiss. After a moment, a systematic representative pulsed a question. Should we be concerned? Thexron waved a dismissive claw. Humans are a minor species, emotional and soft. They have contributed little beyond taking jobs nobody else wanted. This actually simplifies council operations. We have one less voice to accommodate in votes. Several delegates signaled agreement. The Veltros coordinator pulled up human contribution records on the central display. They managed several diplomatic and humanitarian programs, minor operations. We can easily redistribute these duties. Exactly, Thexron said. Let us move on to the trade negotiations with the Corvan Empire. The council returned to business. Nobody noticed the logistics coordinator, a methodical Trell named Vex, quietly downloading the complete list of human-operated programs. His multiple eyes scanned the data, and something in his analytical mind registered a warning. But Thexron was already speaking about tariff structures, and Vex filed his concern away. Across council space, humans began their departure. They did not rush. They did not protest or demand. They simply packed their belongings, closed their offices, and said polite goodbyes. On Station Meridian, Ji-woo Choi finished her shift at the interspecies orphanage. She had spent the day comforting a young Kravik child whose parents had died in a mining accident. The child's scales were still pale blue with youth, and he clung to Ji-woo with desperate strength. "You are leaving?" he asked in broken common. "Yes, little one, but Counselor Vrex will take good care of you." Vrex, a Veltros, assigned to replace the human staff, watched from the doorway. She had been trained for combat and administration. Childcare had never been part of her education. The young Kravik looked at her and whimpered. Ji-woo hugged him one more time. "Be brave. You are stronger than you know." On the border station between Keltharian and Vox Space, the human mediation team gathered their files. For 15 years, they had prevented conflicts between the two territorial species. Every border dispute, every trade disagreement, every cultural misunderstanding had been carefully resolved through patient dialogue. The Keltharian commander watched them go. "Who will mediate now?" The human team leader, Sung-min Han, shook his head. "I am sure the council will assign someone capable. But you understood both our peoples. You found common ground where we saw only differences. Then perhaps," Sung-min said gently, "you should look harder for that common ground yourselves." In the council's mental health wing, human counselors said goodbye to their patients, the systematic who had struggled with integration disorder, the Kravik warrior dealing with combat trauma, the Veltros scientist facing existential crisis. All of them had found help with human therapists who somehow understood pain across species barriers. 3 weeks passed. The humans closed their embassies, withdrew their personnel, and departed council space without drama or ceremony. They simply strolled out as if leaving a party that had grown tiresome. On Earth, Min Jun met with Director Seo-Yun Han in the diplomatic headquarters overlooking the Pacific Ocean. "The withdrawal is complete," Seo-Yun reported. "All our people are safely home or reassigned to independent systems that requested our help." Min Jun gazed out at the water. "How long do you think it will take?" "For them to notice? I give it a month." "I think less," Min Jun said quietly. "The cracks are already showing." On the Keltharian Vox border, a minor shipping dispute escalated. Without human mediators, both sides sent warships instead of diplomats. The first shots were fired on the 22nd day after humanity's departure. In the council chamber, Thexron received the report with growing unease. This was exactly the kind of situation humans would have resolved in an afternoon. Now it threatened to become a full war. Vex, the logistics coordinator, appeared on his communication screen. "Council leader, we need to discuss the human departure. I have been reviewing the data. There is a problem." Thexron felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Was it worry? Impossible. Humans were weak, emotional, insignificant. "What kind of problem?" he asked. Vex's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. "A very large one." Vex stood before the emergency council session, with data streaming across multiple holographic displays. His Trell biology allowed him to process vast amounts of information simultaneously, and right now, every data stream showed the same pattern. Failure. "Council members," he began, his voice steady despite the chaos his reports revealed. "In the 38 days since human departure, we have experienced critical failures in 82% of diplomatic and humanitarian operations." Thexeron's scales darkened with irritation. "Explain how a minor species could be so integral to operations." Vex pulled up the first chart. "The Keltharian-Vox conflict is now a shooting war. 7 ships destroyed, 43 casualties. Humans mediated 172 disputes between these species over the past decade. Success rate, 98%. The current council-assigned mediator withdrew after both sides threatened him." A Veltros delegate spoke up. "We sent Ambassador Kreth. He is highly logical and experienced." He used pure cost-benefit analysis, Vex replied. Both sides felt insulted. Humans apparently employed something called empathy. They made each side feel heard before presenting solutions. The word empathy caused confused murmuring. Most council species understood the concept intellectually, but found it impractical for governance. Vex continued. The situation worsens. Orphanages on 7 worlds have closed. Humans were the only species managing interspecies orphan care. We assumed other species would volunteer. None have. Thexron shifted uncomfortably. What of the children? Transferred to species-specific facilities where available. 47 children have no species-specific options. They are currently in temporary holding. The Kravik child on Station Meridian has stopped eating. The Velthros counselor assigned to replace human staff does not know how to help him. A systematic representative pulsed a question. Why can the Velthros not simply provide nutrition? The child is grieving, Vex said. He requires emotional support. The human counselor provided this. The Velthros counselor has military training. She does not understand why the child will not respond to logical arguments about survival. More displays appeared. Each one showed another failure. Emergency disaster response networks collapsed. Humans coordinated relief efforts for natural disasters, disease outbreaks, and industrial accidents. They maintained contact lists, resource databases, and rapid response teams. We discovered this when a plasma leak on mining station Tychos killed 37 workers. The distress call went unanswered for 4 hours because nobody knew who to contact. Interspecies adoption services, suspended. Mental health support networks, failing. Addiction recovery programs, closed. Grief counseling, unavailable. Peacekeeping, de-escalation training, discontinued. With each item, Vex pulled up the data. And with each item, the same pattern emerged. Humans had managed it. Humans had volunteered. Humans had done the work quietly and efficiently, while other species focused on military power and economic expansion. A council member from the Corvin Empire finally spoke. How did we not know humans were doing all this? Because nobody asked, Vex said simply. Humans volunteered for positions other species found tedious, emotionally exhausting, or beneath their dignity. We accepted their help without questioning the scope. Thexron stood, his massive frame dominating the chamber. This is unacceptable. We are the Galactic Council. We command vast resources and technological superiority. Surely we can replace the efforts of one minor species. Vex's eyes blinked in his species equivalent of a skeptical expression. We have tried, Council Leader. I have the results. The next display showed a disaster. Kravik warriors assigned to orphanage duty. The massive scaled beings towered over terrified children. Their gruff attempts at comfort sounded like threats. After 2 days, 3 children had hidden in ventilation shafts and refused to come out. The Kravik volunteers are confused, Vex reported. They state that children should respect strength and obey commands. They do not understand why frightened orphans do not respond to military discipline. Another display showed the systematic attempt at grief counseling. They had provided the bereaved with detailed logical arguments for why death was a natural process and grief was an inefficient emotional response. 53 patients had filed formal complaints. The Velthros disaster relief team had arrived at a colony suffering from a disease outbreak and immediately began calculating which patients were worth saving based on economic productivity. The colonial governor had sent them away. They keep failing, a delegate said quietly. Why? Vex pulled up one final display. It showed success rates, human diplomatic missions, 94% success. Other species attempting the same missions, 31% success. Human crisis response, average response time 12 minutes. Other species, 4 hours. Human patient satisfaction in mental health services, 89%. Other species, 22%. The humans possess something we do not, Vex said. They call it emotional intelligence. the ability to understand feelings across species barriers, to make others feel heard and valued, to provide comfort in ways that logic cannot address. Thexron sat down heavily. These are skills for the weak, for species that cannot compete through strength or innovation. Yet without these skills, Vex replied, our civilization is falling apart. On the border worlds near human space, a different story was unfolding. Independent systems not affiliated with the Council began reporting unusual peace and prosperity. Human aid workers, now freed from Council duties, had offered their services to these worlds. A Veltros merchant ship captain reported back to the Council. I stopped at Parian Station. It was a violent, chaotic place. Now there is peace. Humans mediated disputes between the 5 species living there. They set up mental health services, trained local peacekeepers in de-escalation, and established an orphanage. I asked how much they charged. They said their only payment was knowing they helped. More reports came in. Human colonies were thriving. More importantly, any system near human space that requested help received it. Medical teams, diplomatic advisors, crisis counselors, educators, humans were building something new outside Council structure. Ji-Woo Choi stood on Parian Station, holding a young Velthros child who had lost her parents to violence. The child's scales shimmered with the colors of sadness. You are safe now, Ji-Woo said softly. We will take care of you. A Kravik refugee watched from nearby. He had fled the border war, traumatized by combat. Human counselors were helping him process his experiences, something the Kravik military had never offered. Why do you help us? He asked Ji-Woo. We are not your species. Ji-Woo smiled. Because you need help. That is enough reason. Back in the council chamber, Thexron reviewed Vex's reports in silence. 17 conflicts escalating, 4 humanitarian disasters. Mental health crisis among several council species whose support networks had collapsed. And all of it traced back to one simple fact. Humans had been holding civilization together with patience, empathy, and care. And everyone had been too busy measuring military strength and economic output to notice. How many humans were engaged in these activities? Thexron asked quietly. Vex checked his data. Approximately 40,000 across Council space. 40,000, out of billions of Council citizens. 40,000 humans doing the emotional labor that allowed everyone else to function. Thexron felt something he rarely experienced, shame. The inventory took 6 weeks. Vex assembled a team of coordinators from 12 species to catalog every role humans had filled in Council operations. What they discovered shocked even Vex, who prided himself on never being surprised by data. The central database displayed the results in the main Council chamber. Thexron stared at the numbers with growing horror. Galactic Mental Health Network, 92% human-operated. They had counselors trained to understand the psychology of 41 different species. They ran support groups for trauma survivors, addiction recovery programs, grief counseling, family therapy, and crisis intervention hotlines. The waiting list for non-human therapists was now 8 months long. Interspecies adoption and foster care. 97% human-managed. Humans ran the agencies that placed orphaned children with families across species barriers. They handled the complex emotional work of helping parents bond with children who looked nothing like them. They provided training, support, and follow-up care. Without them, 312 children were in bureaucratic limbo. Peacekeeping training. Humans designed and taught 84% of de-escalation courses. While other species trained peacekeepers in combat tactics, humans taught them how to calm angry crowds, negotiate with hostage takers, and resolve conflicts without violence. The current peacekeeping failures across Council space spoke to the loss of this training. Disaster relief coordination. Humans managed the entire network. They knew which species had medical supplies to spare, which had transport capacity, which had personnel willing to help. They maintained relationships with thousands of emergency responders across the galaxy. When crisis struck, humans made 3 calls and help arrived. Without them, planetary governors were discovering that nobody answered their distress signals. Elder care facilities, 78% human-staffed. Humans cared for aging members of species whose own cultures had little patience for the elderly. The Kravik sent their old warriors to human-run facilities because only humans treated them with dignity instead of pity. The systematic elderly, struggling with degrading energy patterns, found comfort with human caregivers who did not see them as obsolete. The list continued. Reconciliation programs for post-war societies, mediation services for family disputes, support networks for refugees, cultural exchange programs, education initiatives for disadvantaged colonies, rehabilitation services for former criminals. Every single program focused on emotional and social needs. Every single program required patience, empathy, and the ability to care about individuals rather than statistics. A Corvan delegate reviewed the data with visible distress. How did one species do all this? They volunteered, Vex replied. Every human diplomat had training in conflict resolution and psychology. Every human aid worker studied multiple species' cultural norms and emotional needs. They considered this basic education. Thexron paced the chamber. We must replicate their programs. Assign our personnel to these roles immediately. The next month proved disastrous. Council species tried to fill human roles. They failed spectacularly. Kravik warriors assigned to mental health counseling told trauma survivors to be stronger and overcome weakness through discipline. Patient satisfaction dropped to 4%. 15 patients filed formal complaints after being told their grief was inefficient emotional processing. Veltros diplomats approached interspecies adoption with mathematical precision, matching children to families based on pure statistical compatibility. They created spreadsheets and algorithms. They could not explain to a grieving systematic child why she should bond with Kravik parents simply because the data suggested optimal outcomes. Adoption rates dropped by 91%. The systematic attempted disaster relief coordination using perfect logic. They calculated response times, resource allocation, and efficiency metrics. What they could not do was convince people to help. When a systematic coordinator called a medical facility requesting supplies for a plague-stricken colony, they presented optimal routing data and statistical projections. The facility administrator agreed the logic was sound, but somehow never sent the supplies. When a human coordinator had made the same request, they had asked about the administrator's family, remembered that his daughter was graduating next month, and congratulated him before mentioning the colony that desperately needed help. The supplies had arrived within hours. Vex documented every failure. He began to understand something profound. Humans did not succeed through superior technology or greater intelligence. They succeeded because they made people feel valued. They built relationships based on genuine care. And those relationships became the invisible threads holding civilization together. Meanwhile, news from independent space grew more interesting. Systems near human colonies reported unprecedented cooperation and peace. Vex dispatched observers to investigate. The report from Parian Station was illuminating. The station housed 5 species with a long history of conflict. Violence had been common. Now it was rare. Human mediators had not imposed solutions. They had taught the residents how to talk to each other. The humans showed us something amazing, a Veltros merchant explained. They taught us to listen before speaking, to ask questions before making assumptions, to recognize that everyone wants the same things: safety, dignity, and hope for their children. On mining colony Theta 7, humans had stopped a labor dispute from becoming violent. Both workers and management now met monthly to discuss concerns before they escalated. Productivity had increased 37%. On the refugee settlement at Karis Point, Humans had established mental health services for traumatized families from 12 different war zones. The settlement had become known as the most peaceful multi-species community in the sector. Everywhere humans went, they built connection. They taught emotional intelligence. They showed species that had spent centuries competing through strength and cunning how to cooperate through understanding and compassion. A Kravik commander near human space sent a message to the council. It was blunt and uncomfortable. I have fought 17 battles. I have conquered 4 systems. I have medals for valor and strategic brilliance, but I could not help my own son when combat trauma broke his mind. A human counselor in 3 sessions gave him tools I never knew existed. She taught him that surviving horror does not make you weak, that asking for help is courage, not failure. My son smiles again. I owe humans a debt I can never repay. The message circulated through council networks. It was followed by others, a Veltros scientist crediting human therapists with saving her from suicide, a systematic colony thanking human mediators for preventing civil war. A dozen species reporting that human-taught de-escalation techniques had resolved conflicts peacefully. Thexron read every message. His scales had faded to a dull gray, the color of shame among his people. They were not weak, he said to Vex. We were blind. Yes, council leader. These skills they possess, empathy, compassion, emotional intelligence. Can they be taught? Vex considered carefully. Humans believe so, but it requires students willing to see these traits as strengths rather than weaknesses. It requires time, patience, and practice. Most importantly, it requires genuine care for others' well-being. Thexron looked at the data one more time. 17 active conflicts, 9 humanitarian crises, thousands of individuals suffering without support. All because the council had dismissed human contributions as the work of the weak. Contact Ambassador Park, Thexron said quietly. Request a meeting. A private one. What will you tell him? Thexron's scales flickered with colors Vex had never seen before. Regret, perhaps, or humility. The truth, Thexron said, that we were fools. Thexron had never felt small before. As a Kravik, he towered over most species, his scales and natural weapons commanding respect. But standing in the modest conference room overlooking Earth's Pacific Ocean, facing Ambassador Min-Jun Park and Director Seo-Yun Han, he felt diminished. The room was simple. Wooden table, comfortable chairs, windows showing endless blue water. No grand displays of wealth or power, just quiet dignity. Min-Jun poured tea into ceramic cups. The gesture was gentle, unhurried. He offered one to Thexron, who accepted it with claws that suddenly felt too large and clumsy. Thank you for seeing us, Thexron began. His voice, usually commanding, sounded uncertain. Seo-Yun sat across from him, her dark eyes calm. She was the head of Earth's diplomatic corps, a woman who had spent 30 years building bridges between species. She waited for him to continue. The Council is in crisis, Thexron said. You know this. Our reports show conflicts escalating across 17 sectors. Humanitarian programs have collapsed. Species that lived peacefully for decades are at war. And we have discovered the cause. Have you? Min-Jun's voice was polite but cool. We did not understand your contributions. We saw them as minor, emotional work for a weak species. We were wrong. Seo-Yun sipped her tea. We told you our work mattered. For 47 years we explained its value. You did not listen. Thexron's scales darkened with shame. No, we did not. We measured strength in weapons and wealth. We never considered that civilization requires more than power. It requires care. He pulled up a data display. Images appeared in the air between them. The Kravik child on Station Meridian, still refusing to eat. The Keltharian-Vox border conflict, now claiming 3 ships a week. The closed orphanages. The failing mental health networks. We cannot do what you did, Thexron admitted. We have tried. Our people do not possess your skills. They do not understand how to comfort the grieving or calm the angry. They see these as weaknesses to overcome, not strengths to develop. Minjun set down his cup. Why are you here, council leader? To ask you to return. The council needs you. The galaxy needs you. Seo Yun laughed. It was not bitter, just sad. 2 months ago, you were relieved to see us go. You called our work inefficient. You said our empathy was illogical. You dismissed our patience as time-wasting. Now you need us, and suddenly our value is clear. Yes, Thexron said simply. We were fools. I was a fool. I am here to admit this and beg for your help. Minjun stood and walked to the window. Outside, seabirds circled over the waves. Do you know why we left? You said you felt undervalued. That was part of it. But the real reason ran deeper. Minjun turned to face them. For 47 years, we gave everything to the council. Our people worked endless hours mediating conflicts, caring for orphans, counseling the traumatized. We did it because we believed in galactic civilization. We believed in cooperation between species. He walked back to the table. But every council session, we watched other species praised for military victories and economic achievements. The Kravik received honors for conquest. The Veltros won awards for profitable trade deals. The Systematic were celebrated for technological innovation. And humans? We received polite nods for handling the jobs nobody else wanted. Seo Yun continued the thought. Worse, our own people began to doubt themselves. Young humans would ask, are we weak? Are we failures because we choose care over conquest? Our children grew up hearing other species call empathy, soft, and compassion inefficient. We were teaching the galaxy that the things we valued most were worthless. Thexron felt each word like a physical blow. We harmed you, not just by ignoring your work, but by making you doubt its worth. Yes, Minjun said quietly. So we left. Not in anger. Just exhausted from fighting for recognition that never came. And now? Thexron asked. What are you doing with your freedom? Seo Yun smiled. Helping species who ask for help and actually appreciate it. The independent systems near Earth have welcomed our aid workers, our mediators, our counselors. They treat our people with respect. They see emotional intelligence as valuable, not weak. She pulled up her own data display. Images of thriving colonies, peaceful settlements, happy children of multiple species playing together. This is Parian Station. It was a war zone. Now it is home to the most successful interspecies community in the sector. This is Karis Point Refugee Settlement. Traumatized families from a dozen conflicts, now rebuilding their lives with hope. We are building something new, Minjun added. A network of cooperation based on mutual respect. Where healing is honored alongside building, where the ability to comfort a crying child matters as much as the ability to command a fleet. Thexron looked at the images. He saw what the council had lost. More than workers, more than programs. They had lost a vision of what civilization could be. We want to change, he said. The Council has begun implementing programs to teach empathy and emotional intelligence. Several species are developing their own mediation and care initiatives. It is imperfect. We are clumsy at it, but we are trying. He paused, then continued with complete honesty. But we cannot learn fast enough. People are suffering now. The Keltharian Vox War claims more lives each day. Children remain in temporary holding with no one to care for them properly. The traumatized receive no help because we do not know how to help them. Seo Yun studied him carefully. So you want us to fix your problems while you learn at your own pace? No, Thexron said. I want to propose something different. A partnership. Humans return to council space, but not as minor members doing work others dismiss. As co-leaders of a new initiative focused on what you call essential civilization services. Minjun raised an eyebrow. Explain. The Council will formally recognize that military strength, economic power, and technological innovation mean nothing without social cohesion, emotional well-being, and peaceful conflict resolution. We will create equal status for these contributions. Species who excel at care will be honored the same as species who excel at commerce or combat. Thexron's scales shifted to colors of sincerity. You were right. We measured the wrong things. We valued the wrong strengths. Help us learn to value what truly matters. Help us build a civilization that cares for all its members, not just the powerful. Seo-yun and Min-jun exchanged glances. A lifetime of partnership allowed them to communicate without words. We will discuss this, Min-jun said, with our people, with the communities we now serve. If we return, it will not be on the Council's terms. It will be on terms that ensure our work is genuinely valued. I understand, Thexron said. I hope you will return. But I also understand if you do not. We failed you. Trust must be rebuilt. As Thexron left Earth, he carried with him a new understanding. Humanity's greatest strength was not something they did. It was something they were. And the galaxy desperately needed to learn what they knew. 6 months after Thexron's visit to Earth, the Galactic Council chamber looked different. The changes were subtle but significant. New displays showed metrics beyond military strength and economic output, conflict resolution rates, mental health support availability, orphan placement success, elder care quality, refugee integration statistics. The Council had begun measuring what actually mattered. Vex stood before the Assembly presenting the quarterly progress report. His multiple eyes tracked data streams with satisfaction. Council species have made progress in essential civilization services, he reported. The Kravik have established their first trauma counseling program for veterans. Success rate is 41%, a significant improvement from 0. The Veltros have trained 200 mediators in human-designed de-escalation techniques. Conflict resolution success has reached 53%. He continued through the list. The Systematic had created grief support groups, adapting human models to their energy-based psychology. 3 Corvan colonies had established interspecies orphanages, staffed by volunteers learning from human training materials. 12 species now offered mental health first aid courses to their citizens. The programs are imperfect, Vex admitted. Response times remain slower than human operations. Success rates are lower, but improvement is steady. More importantly, attitudes are changing. Compassion is no longer dismissed as weakness. Empathy is recognized as valuable skill. Thexron stood. His scales had regained their healthy purple color, though they now carried subtle patterns of humility. The question remains, is our progress sufficient? Have we earned the right to ask humanity to return? The chamber fell silent. Every delegate knew the answer would determine their civilization's future. The main doors opened. Min-jun Park and Seo-yun Han entered the chamber, followed by a delegation of 20 human diplomats and specialists. They walked calmly to the center of the room. Min-jun spoke clearly. We have discussed the Council's proposal extensively. With our people. With the independent systems we now serve. With the thousands of human aid workers and mediators building new networks across the galaxy. He paused, and Thexron felt his breath catch. We have decided to return, but with conditions. Relief swept through the chamber, but Min-jun raised a hand. First, essential civilization services must have equal status with military and economic contributions, not just in words, but in practice. Council votes, budget allocation, honors, and recognition. If a species excels at caring for others, they receive the same respect as a species that excels at building warships. Thexron nodded immediately. Agreed. We have already drafted the legislation. Second, Humans will serve as co-leaders of the new Galactic Cooperation Initiative alongside council members who have demonstrated genuine commitment to these values. We will not return as subordinates doing work others avoid. We return as partners building something better. A Velthros delegate activated her speaker. The council accepts this condition. We recognize that leadership in cooperation requires expertise in cooperation. SEO Yun continued. Third, all council species must implement mandatory empathy and conflict resolution training for diplomats, peacekeepers, and anyone working with vulnerable populations. No more sending warriors to counsel traumatized children. No more assigning pure logicians to grief counseling. A systematic representative pulsed agreement. We have already begun this training. It is harder than we expected, but we are learning. Minjun smiled slightly. Fourth, and finally, the independent systems currently receiving human services will not be abandoned. The Council will extend cooperation frameworks to them, recognizing that civilization includes everyone, not just powerful member species. Thexron spread his claws in a Kravik gesture of complete agreement. We were wrong to exclude them. We were wrong about many things. Your terms are accepted. The formal documents were signed quickly, but the real change came in what followed. Jiwoo Choi returned to Station Meridian. The orphanage had remained open, staffed by a mixed team of species who had spent 6 months learning from human training materials. They were still learning, still making mistakes, but they tried. The young Kravik child who had stopped eating rushed to her when she entered. His scales had deepened to healthy dark blue. You came back. I promised I would, Jiwoo said, hugging him. She looked at the Veltros counselor who had struggled so much 6 months ago. The counselor's posture showed exhaustion, but also pride. I learned, the counselor said simply. You taught me that children need to feel safe before they can hear logic, that comfort matters more than efficiency, that patience is not weakness. Jiwoo smiled. You did learn. Well done. On the Keltharian-Vox border, human mediators returned alongside newly trained Kravik and Velthros diplomats. The war had claimed hundreds of lives before both sides finally accepted mediation. The process was slow and painful, but the shooting stopped. Sungmin Han, the mediator who had left 6 months ago, worked with a young Kravik diplomat named Vorex. Vorex had volunteered for mediation training despite mockery from his warrior caste. He watched Sungmin carefully. You make them feel heard, Vorex observed. Even when they are being unreasonable. Especially when they are being unreasonable, Sungmin corrected. Unreasonable people are usually frightened people. Fear needs compassion, not contempt. Vorex practiced the techniques. His first attempts were clumsy. He was too direct, too focused on solutions before understanding problems. But Sungmin was patient, and Vorex was determined to learn. By the end of the week, Vorex successfully mediated his first dispute, a minor shipping disagreement that could have escalated. He made both captains feel respected. They agreed to a compromise that satisfied everyone. Vorex's scales glowed with pride. I did it. You did, Sungmin agreed. Now imagine thousands of people across the galaxy learning these skills. Imagine a civilization where every conflict is met with understanding before force. That is what we are building. In the council chamber, new displays showed progress. Human operations had resumed, but now they included mixed species teams. Humans still excelled at the work, but they were no longer alone. Other species were learning, growing, understanding. Thexron reviewed the data with Vex. Response times are improving, success rates are rising, but it will take years before other species match human capabilities in these areas. Perhaps we never will, Vex said. Humans evolved to value social bonds and emotional connection above individual strength. Their entire civilization is built on cooperation and empathy. Other species have different evolutionary paths. Then we learn what we can and honor what we cannot match, Thexron replied. That is the point. Different strengths, building a whole. Seo Yun stood at the window of her new office in Council headquarters. She held the same title as the heads of military operations and economic development. Director of Essential Civilization Services, with a seat at the leadership table. Min Jun joined her. Do you think it will last, this change? It will last if we make it last, Seo Yun said. The council panicked when we left because they discovered they needed us. Now they must discover they need to be like us. And if they forget? Seo Yun smiled. Then we will remind them. But I think they have learned. You cannot watch civilization nearly collapse and forget what held it together. Below them, in the council plaza, a mixed group of beings gathered. Kravik, Velthros, Systematic, Corvin, and humans. They were the first graduating class of the new Galactic Empathy Corps. They would spread across council space, teaching what humans had always known. Civilization is not built by the strongest or the richest or the most advanced. It is built by those who care, by those who listen, by those who see suffering and choose to help. The humans had strolled out, and the council had panicked. But panic had led to understanding, and understanding had led to change. The galaxy was learning what it meant to be human, and slowly, carefully, civilization was becoming something worth building.